The Parsha Vayechi we read this week, we're going to read in beginning about a father taking a son to take an oath and ask him to take an oath, at least according to most opinions. We're going to have a look to see what happened here, why there was this insistence, and did Yosef comply with it completely? Or was there a little bit of reluctance here? Let's have a look at the commentaries and see how they learn what happened here with the Shvuah, the oath, to take Yaakov out of the country of Egypt and bury him in Eretz Israel, Eretz Canaan. Vayikravu Yemei Yisrael Amus, and as the days of Israel approached dying, he calls his son Yosef and he says to him, "If I found favor in your eyes, please place your hand under my thigh. Ve'asisa chesed, act kindly with me, be'emes, and truthfully. Al nosik bereni b'mitzrayim, do not bury me in Egypt. V'shachavti ma'abesai, I'm going to be with my fathers, I'm going to die. Unsasani b'mitzrayim, you shall carry me out of Egypt. Ukvartani b'kvarosam, and bury me in their burial spot. Vayomar, and he responded, he said, Onoichi e'aseh kidvarecha, I will do as you say. Vayomer, so his father says, Hishavali, swear to me. Vayishavalai, and he swears to him. Vayishtachu Yisrael al Rosh Hamita, and Yisrael bows down to the head of the bed. So here, when we look at this story, we see that initially, upon the request of Yaakov to bury him in Eretz Canaan, to take him out of the country, we find that Yosef's response, I will do as you say, doesn't suffice. His father is not sufficiently happy with that. And therefore he says, Hishavali, swear to me. He insists that he gives a shvuah. So he swears to him. And then Yisrael is satisfied. First of all, why does he call his son Yosef? We look at Rashi. He calls the son who is able to, who has the ability to do things. So he calls the one who has the ability to do so. And he says, Simna yodcha v'hishava, please put your hand now v'hishava and swear. So according to Rashi, Simna yodcha means place your hand. It means that he's asking him to give a shvuah. He's actually asking him to swear. But the question arises, why did Yaakov not rely on Yosef's word? Why does he now insist on him taking an oath? So let's have a look at two commentaries here, one from the Ramban. The Ramban says there were external pressures that would present themselves, and Yaakov knew in advance. So, says the Ramban, Hishavali, swear to me, but Yeshavaloi, and he swore to him. Loi hoyo Yaakov choshed bivnoi hatzadik ha'ovloi. There's no way that Yaakov would have suspected his beloved son, his tzaddik, that he would yamreh, that he would rebel against the command of his father and the word that he had promised him. After all, his son answered, Anochi eseh kidvarecha. And Yaakov trusted that. Yaakov definitely trusted that. So what was the story here? Aval also came, the reason that Yaakov insisted on him giving a shvuah was lechazek ha'inyan be'enei Farai. This was to give Yosef the strength in the eyes of Pharaoh, to strengthen this. Why? Perhaps he wouldn't give him permission to separate him from Yaakov. Yaakov was, remember, seen as he was the miracle maker. With him, with his entry into Egypt, the river Nile starts to flow. The back of the famine is broken. There's no way that Paro is going to want to let him go. And when Yosef would ask him, I need to go and take my father out of the country, they would say, Sorry, he is saying the first thing that, I beg your pardon, the first thing that Rabban says is that that Paroi would not want Yosef to leave the country. And he would say to him, I can't afford to have you gone. You're the viceroy of Egypt. You're the one who's brought us all this blessing. Shalach zachachos, send, delegate it to your brothers and your servants. Let them take him up. That's one possibility. Or there could be a even more harsh possibility. That Paro would insist that this prophet, this great sage, Jacob, should be buried in their land. Number one, as a kavod, honor for them. Number two, lizchus, for a merit for them. He brought them, as we said, so much blessing. The river Nile starts to flow. The back of the famine is broken, etc., etc. On both of these accounts, Yosef would not have been able to accompany his father out of the country. And therefore, Hishbioi, Yaakov makes him swear. It would not be appropriate for him now to make him break his oath that he gave to his father. That's reason number one. That's brought by the Ramban. And this is because of external pressures. And indeed, this was well planned, because we read later on that if we look as the Ramban continues, it says that later on, Paro says, Alei ukvoiras avicha karasherish biyacha. When Yosef requests permission to leave the country, what does Paro say? Go up, bury your father as he made you swear. Now, these two words, as he made you swear, are indicating that Pharaoh is telling him, look, I really wouldn't want you to go up, but because your father made you take an oath, I'll let you go. The Madrash and Rashi and the Gemara brings this, goes even further and says that Pharaoh was afraid to tell Yosef to break his vow. Why couldn't he tell him, break your oath? So you made an oath, so break it. Because Pharaoh knew that Yosef had made an oath to him that he would not reveal a secret about Pharaoh that was very embarrassing for him and could have brought his downfall. And that was that he did not know the language of Hebrew. And no matter how much the Medrash tells us they tried to teach him that language, there was no way he could digest it. He could fathom it. And not knowing Hebrew would have been a cause for him not to be a ruler of the country. Either way, what we see is that the reason of the shvur was for external pressures. But there's another way of understanding this, and this is brought down by the Rabbi in a Sikha and presented in the Mor Shabbat Torah, and that is as follows. Internal pressures. What's the internal pressures here? Why would Yosef perhaps not want to carry out the wishes of his father? Yesh Loma, we can say, Shedrishato shel Yaakov, the request or the demand of Yaakov, that Yosef has to swear, was not made just to guarantee that Yosef would be able to withstand external pressures, chitzoniyim, but rather, and maybe in principle, in order that Yosef himself personally would not think that maybe it's better we leave the coffin of our father in Egypt. Why? Why would he want to leave the coffin in Egypt, even against the wishes of his father? This is kedei, in order that his chus, his merit, would protect them and would accompany them throughout the hardships and pains of the whole long galut in Egypt that they were going to eventually endure. And it was because of this machshava, because of this thought, that would be going through his son's mind, lidchos, to postpone or delay the fulfillment of the promise to his father, but for a good reason, in order to bring to'eles, in order to provide benefit for the whole generation of the Jewish people. In other words, he would weigh up the pros and the cons. Yes, there is the pros that, of course, I'm fulfilling the wishes of my father. And what son would not want to fulfill the dying wishes of his father? However, against that, we have the benefit for Klal Yisrael, that the power of having a tzaddik, the Oren of Yaakov in Egypt, would have been enormous. And therefore, Yaakov said to himself, Kidei limnoya, in order to prevent such a possibility, Yaakov insisted that Yosef swears to him. He gives an oath. And that is in order that his chayvus, that his commitment will be unconditional and be muchletas, would be absolute. So that now, having given the oath, no calculations, no shikulim, no second thoughts would be able to be mevatla, to break that oath. And that's why the oath was given. One of the questions raised about the oath is as follows. Now, we know the Ramban holds that the Avos, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, did not keep the Torah and mitzvahs outside the land of Israel. This is, of course, how the Ramban explains that Yaakov was able to have two sisters as wives. This is against the Torah. One is not allowed to marry two sisters. One is not allowed to even divorce one sister and marry the other one. Whilst both sisters are alive, you cannot marry two sisters. Absolutely forbidden. Once you've married one, you can't marry another. And here Yaakov marries two. So the Ramban learns and answers that Yaakov did not keep the Torah outside the land of Israel. And indeed, upon entry back home into the land of Canaan, in the land of Israel, who dies along the roadside? Rachel. So he's only got one wife now, or one sister, I should say, one of the sisters as a wife as he enters Israel. The question here that was raised by several authorities is, how does it help to give an oath? If indeed the Avos did not keep the Torah outside Israel, how does an oath help? Let's have a look and see how this was examined by the sages through the ages. The Midbar Kedemos, which is authored by the Chidah, brings in under the headline Yud. This book of Midbar Kedemos is organized according to the letters of the Aleph base, and not according to the Parsha. And under the letter Yud, he has on Yosef in chapter 55 a question that was raised by Marenu Harav Hagadol Mahari Ze'evi, which is as follows. According to the Ramban, who holds that the laws of Hashem, the Avos did not keep in Chutz La'aretz, outside Israel, and that's why Yaakov could marry two sisters. If that's the case, how can Yaakov Avinu feel comfortable when Yosef now swears, as if that's going to end the problem? Oh, Yosef made a shvur, that's it. Yosef is in Chutz La'aretz, he's outside Israel. And we know that Yosef, if he's outside Israel, does not have to keep the mitzvahs of the Torah. And they didn't, according to the Ramban. There was no need to. If that's the case, how by taking an oath would that strengthen, if you like, Yosef's commitment to his father? So the Ramban, there were two answers that are suggested by the Chidah, and they are as follows. He says, one answer that was given by this same Rabbi, Moreh Zebi, was as follows. Given to Yosef Yoda, Yosef knew that he's never going to come back to Israel. He knew that now he's in Egypt, he's going to stay in Egypt forever, for the rest of his life, except, of course, when he had to bury his father. So since he's going to remain Chutz La'aretz, he took upon himself that he would fulfill the mitzvahs even in Chutz La'aretz. In other words, this is what the Ramban says, that the Avos, Yaakov, for example, did not keep the mitzvahs in Chutz La'aretz. That was because he knew he's going to come back to the land of Israel and he'll keep it there. But if, even according to the Ramban, if the Avos, or if Yaakov would not have come back to Israel and knew he's going to stay in Chutz La'aretz, then he would have wanted to keep the mitzvahs in Chutz La'aretz as well. And Yosef in the same way. Yosef knew that he's destined to stay in the land of Egypt. He's not moving out of there fast at all. And therefore, he wanted to keep the mitzvahs, was makabel upon himself to do the mitzvahs in Chutz La'aretz. And for this reason, the mitzvah of keeping your oath, which is a mitzvah of the Torah, not one of the 7 mitzvahs, B'nai Noach, Yosef would have kept in Chutz La'aretz as well. And the Chidah concludes saying that I've actually heard this Me'ateres Roshi from my dear father, crown of my father, who heard this from Per Kodesh, from Morena Harav Hanizka, from this Rabbi, Rav Gadol Maharizevi. Second answer. And the Chidah suggests this, his own. This is his own teretz. Va'ani ba'anai ani, in my humble opinion, I say, that even though the non-Jewish people, B'nai Noach, and that includes the Ovis, who before Matan Torah considered B'nai Noach, even though the Goyim are not subject to the mitzvah of Bal Yachal. Now, what does Bal Yachal mean? Bal Yachal means there's a posuk in the Torah where it says Lo Yachal Devorei. A man is not allowed to profane his word. If he gives an oath, if he makes a vow, he has to keep it. But this does not apply before Matan Torah. There was no rule about keeping your vow, keeping your oath before Matan Torah, as indeed it says in Yerushalmi in Nazir. Mikol came nevertheless, says the Chidah, there are certain times where even before Matan Torah, it would have required the observance, the meticulous commitment and observance of an oath. And that is, when you have Sorei Ha'akum, when you have high dignitaries, people of high stature, would be swearing and keeping what they swore, keeping their oath, then it forms a chapter, it almost forms a branch of the mitzvah of Birkat Hashem. Now, what's Birkat Hashem? There are 7 Noahide laws. One of the 7 Noahide laws is, one of the 7 mitzvahs B'nai Noach is, it is forbidden to blaspheme. One is not allowed to curse Hashem's name. Absolutely forbidden. Now, we use the word Birkas Hashem, which is Lashon Saginohar, as a euphemism. Of course, literally it means blessing Hashem. We don't like to write the words or even say the words Kilalas. We don't want to say the curse. But it is forbidden for a Jew or a non-Jew, lahavdil, even before Matan Torah, to blaspheme, to curse Hashem. It's one of the 7 mitzvahs B'nai Noach. Now, if you have a person, a dignitary particularly, high people, that would swear by the name of Hashem and not fulfill it, perhaps there's not a problem of Lo Yachal Devorei. There may be not a problem of do not profane your word, which only applied after Matan Torah, but there is another problem. And the problem is that you have a person in doing such a thing, in not keeping his vow, has been mazalzel chas v'shalom, has profaned God's name. That's like blaspheming God's name. You've used Hashem's name. You haven't kept your vow. That could be tantamount, almost a branch of Birkas Hashem, one of the 7 Noahide laws. And similarly, Abimelech, who makes Avram Avinu Alashlam swear, and he makes him take an oath, and he does. In the eyes of the Goyim, this would have been very, very, very chamur, very strict, and very severe to break such an oath. And if a person would break the oath after taking it, he would be Machal Hashem. And for that reason, this, in his second answer, explains the Chidah that regardless of whether there is an obligation to keep Lo Yachal Devorei, do not profane your word, when Yosef swears to his father, it's like the high dignitaries of the Ummah Ha'olam. It's like the dignitaries of the non-Jewish world who swear, where they would have to keep it anyway because of this mitzvah of Birkas Hashem. The third answer, why giving an oath would have made a difference even before Matan Torah. And that is a interesting distinction brought down by the great Sochet Shabbat Rebbe, the Avnei Nezer, in his Shalos and Shuvas. Now, the Avnei Nezer, Rabbi Avram Bernstein, the Sochet Shabbat Rebbe, passed away around the early 1900s, 1910, I think, around there. Miyashev, he answers the question of the Mishnah Lamelech in the Rambam. And that is as follows. The Mishnah Lamelech there is a massive commentary on that particular halacha, in those halachas. And there he discusses at length, how is it possible that any oaths made before Matan Torah have any legitimacy? For example, the one that Avraham and Yitzchak, each of them in their generation, made to Avimelech. Or another example, the one made by Eliezer swearing to Abraham that he will not take a bride for his son from the daughters of Canaan. What are all these oaths? Asks the Mishnah Lamelech. The concept of an oath has got nothing to do with the 7 Noahide laws. And what application does it have in that generation before the giving of the Torah? And here the Avnei Nezer draws an interesting distinction between a type of shavua, between 2 different types of oaths. Mechalek, he divides, or he distinguishes between if you swear to yourself that you won't do something or you will do something, or whether you swear to someone else. Explains the Avnei Nezer that only after Matan Torah we were commanded in Lo Yachal Devoro, do not profane your word, regarding your own oath. If you swear that you're not going to drink apple juice, that's something that you impose upon yourself. Before Matan Torah, there was no obligation for you to keep that. Absolutely not. Even if you swore in Hashem's name, before Matan Torah, you would not have to keep it. Why? Because before Matan Torah, who says Hashem wants that oath? Who says you have to say it? And furthermore, you can't, when you're swearing, you're not imposing anything on someone else. You're not doing something against someone else. It's for yourself that you're doing it. But what a difference there is to a case where a person swears to someone else. La'acher. When you swear to someone else, it's a different story. Their logic would dictate that you have to fulfill. And you don't even need the Torah to warn us about that. When there is an oath made that I will do something for you, or I won't do something for you, and I swear to that, that's got nothing to do with not just profaning your word. That's to do with logic dictates how can you break a commitment that you made to someone else. That's affecting someone else, and that's I don't need the Torah to tell me that. Explains the Avnei Nezer, and I haven't written it here, but this is also the concept of giving a shavua at Matan Torah. Our rabbis say that when we were on Har Sinai, we made a commitment with an oath to God. That's why we call it, one of the reasons it's called Shavuos. The festival of Shavuos is not just weeks, but Shavuos also comes from the word oaths. We made an oath to God that we will stay with him, we will keep his Torah mitzvahs, and God made an oath to us that he won't abandon us as a nation. Okay, so these are the 2 oaths. But let's think about the oath that we made to Hashem. That oath was made, we will accept your Torah, we will observe it, but we haven't yet got the Torah. We haven't yet, we're just only being made now, Matan Torah. We're only being given the Torah. So how does that oath work? Explains the Avnei Nezer, it works because when we swore that we would keep the Torah, and that's Hashem said, I'll give it to you, and we used our children as guarantors, etc., etc. When we did that, we were not just swearing to ourselves, we're swearing to Hashem, another party. When you swear to another party, then the obligation to commit to that oath does not derive from lo yachal devorei. It derives from common good. It derives from logic. Svara dictates. And for that reason, even the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach, that would be something that would have to be kept. And now, therefore, says the Avnei Nezer, when Yosef swears to his father, he's obligated to keep that promise. Whether or not he's deemed as a Ben Noach, as a Noahide person, whether he's deemed as a Jewish person, it's not relevant. It applies equally before Matan Torah as after Matan Torah, because it's affecting another party. In this case, his father. And that's why his father made him swear, because he would have to keep it anyway. And following on in this way, we can also use an answer for another question in this topic to explain again why the oath is going to help, even before Matan Torah. Let's go back to the story of Yaakov, back when he promises Rachel that he will take her as a wife. And he even gives her some signs to make sure that he doesn't get cheated. Now, let's say after he was misled, and he now finds out the next morning that he's got Leah in bed and not Rachel. Imagine now if he would tell Rachel, sorry, you tricked me, I've got the wrong wife, and now I'm not going to marry you. Imagine if he would be chozerbo. Imagine if he would be retracting. Imagine if he would go to Rachel and say, I'm sorry, Rachel, my descendants are going to have a mitzvah of not marrying two sisters. And I know that it's before Matan Torah, but I feel a bit bad about marrying two sisters. Imagine if he would go back, therefore, and say, I'm sorry, I can't go through with my marriage to you. Well, the Rebbe explains and says that would be very nice to be machmir, to be strict as far as keeping things before Matan Torah, but he would be violating something else. What would he be doing? He would be over the issur of ramos v'sheker, being false, being not true to his wife Rachel. He promised Rachel he would marry her. Yes, it's true that she misled him and she put his sister in. That's true. But now, to break his commitment to her would be considered a violation even in the eyes of the non-Jewish world, even as a ben noach. And for this reason, the Rebbe explains this. Yaakov was obligated to keep his promise and to marry Rachel in order not to violate something which applied even to the ben noach, which would be breaking his promise to her. If that's the case in the story of the two sisters, let's apply that here as well. Ukamoken Khan, similarly here. Avshalom, it's possible to say that when the Yosef gives his oath to Yaakov, yes, it's true, it's before Matan Torah, and maybe they are considered b'nei noach. But even if it's not subject to the mitzvah of Bal Yachel, what about being a subject to the prohibition of being false, of ramos, deception, which even the b'nei noach had been observed and had been strict in, and for that reason, the oath would, if you like, make a violation of that commitment, something that even a ben noach would shy away from, and that's why he made him give a shvuah. What's interesting, though, in the story is that after all is said and done, let's have a look and see what Yosef actually does. It says, Yosef says, I will do as you say. And then it says, Vayomer hishabali, swear to me. He swears to him. But we don't find anywhere in the Chumash about a mention about Yosef actually putting his hand under his thigh, under his father's thigh. We don't find that. It's totally missing. It just says he swore to him. That's all the words are. He swore to him. And that raises questions now. What actually happened in the story? Did he just swear? Did he put his hand there? Let's have a look at the commentaries and to see the disputes that occurred in regard to this story. Why does the Torah not state that Yosef put his hand under Yaakov's thigh? The Torah, the one who wrote the Torah Shulchan Aruch, in his long commentary on the Torah, he has a short commentary as well, but he has a long commentary. The Torah Aruch notes the following. Vayomer simno yodcha tachis yirechi, and Yaakov the father says, put your hand under my thigh, and it does not state that he put his hand under his thigh. Unlike the story with Eliezer, the story of the servant of Abraham, who likewise asks him, place his hand under my thigh, and Eliezer does so. And the Torah says this. There are two possibilities, says the Torah. One is, Shaloi rotza lefarish mipnei hakavod. He did it, but the Torah didn't want to go to the detail of saying he put his hand under the thigh out of respect. Out of respect. He's a son, after all, he's the father. The father told him that, that's correct. He did it, but the Torah doesn't go into those details, simply out of kavod, out of honor for the father. Okay. Or maybe even the son. But there's another opinion. The yesh mefarshim, and there are those who say, lefi hapshat, according to the simple interpretation of the verse, that Yaakov never wanted Yosef to make a shvuah. He never wanted to make him give an oath. Tachas, I beg your pardon, Simna Yodcha Tachas Yerechi does not mean give an oath. That doesn't mean give an oath. Later on, Yaakov says, Hishavali, swear to me. So when Yaakov says, put your hand under my thigh, it's a figurative expression. It did not mean that Yosef had to physically connect with his father at all. Rather, Meforshim learn, says the Torah, it means put yourself in the Uvi HaKorah. I want you to put yourself, throw yourself into this, as if you are me, as if you are me. Put yourself in my place. Tachas Yerechi, that's what it means. I want you to be in my place, Lafarnes Basi. I want you to sustain my household. Simna Yotcha Tachas Yerechi. Nothing to do with an oath. And it's only later on that he says to give an oath. According to this way of learning, there was never a requirement for Yosef to put his hand under the thigh at all. This is the second way of learning, and that's how some learn according to the Pshat. When we look at the request of Yaakov, he seems to add one word when he asks his son to swear, and we wonder why he does this. What is the word he adds? He adds, let's have a look at the word. He says, Hishava li. He says, swear to me. And this word here seemingly is superfluous. What do you need that for? Yosef responded, Dad, I'll do as you say. His father says, no, I want more than that. I want you to swear. So he should have just said, Hishava, swear. Not only does it say li, and it says Vayishava, and he swore loi to him. Both of these words seem redundant. Could have just said, swear, and then he would have sworn, and then Yisrael would have bowed down. It's self-understood that he's swearing to his father. Who else is he swearing to when he says, I'm going to do what you say? So let's have a look and see how the Kli Yakar discusses this and has 4 different ways of understanding this. Number 1, making the oath unbreakable. There are 2 ways in which a person can make an oath. You can make an oath and say, I swear I'll do this. And then you can say, I swear I'll do this for you the way you understand it, the way that Beis Din understand it. That type of an oath is very powerful. It makes it unbreakable. You can't come back later on and say, oh, but if I would have thought this, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't help. Nothing will help then. Says the Kli Yakar, nearly it appears that he was afraid that perhaps Pharaoh would tell him to break his oath. And for that reason, Yaakov says, swear li, me, to me. Don't swear it based on the way you understand it, the way that your advisors understand it, the way that Pharaoh understands it. No, you do it al daiti. You do it according to my das. And the halacha is one who swears al das chaveroi ein lo hatorah b'lo das chaveroi. If you swear and you say, I swear I'll do this according to the way that you intend my shavua to be, then you can never get out of that oath unless the person who you said it to will give you permission. And this is brought down in Tur Shulchan Aruch in the Yoredeya, that there is no way to get out of an oath which is sworn al das chaveroi. For that reason, says the Kli Yakar, he adds the word li to me, ladaiti. And indeed, Vayeshava loi, he swears to him. He does exactly what his father asks him. He swears to him the way that Yaakov understands it. Answer 2. Remove any misunderstanding of what the oath entailed. A fascinating answer in the second answer, says the Kli Yakar, as follows. You see, when Yosef first responded and said, Dad, I'll do as you say, Anochi Asik Varecha, the Medrash in brought by Rabbeinu Bachaya says the following, that Yosef says, you know what? I'm going to do the same thing that you're doing, Dad. I'm going to ask my children and my brothers that they'll bury me in the land of Canaan. It's a great idea. Anochi Asik Varecha could mean I will do as you say, not just I'm going to do as your wishes. I want to copy you, my dad. I want to copy exactly what you're doing. I'm going to ask my children and my brothers to bury me in the land of Canaan. Well, that's okay. But then Yaakov says, swear to me. And if he said hishava without the word li, then it could mean, I want you to swear, and that could cover not just that you should carry me out of Egypt, but if he would have just said, swear, hishava, blanketly, without narrowing it to the word li, then it could mean, I want you to swear that you're going to tell your children to do the same thing to yourself. And that was not the intention of Yaakov. There's no way that Yaakov was making Yosef swear to that part of it. Ve'ilu lo ne'amar lo shen li, had it not added the word li, I might have thought that Yaakov is getting him to swear for everything. Even on those words, Anochi asik baracha, that I will act it like you're doing it, I will follow your footsteps. No. Yaakov was not wanting that. So he says, li. Vayishav aloi. He only swore on that request, the request not to bury him in Egypt and to carry him to the land of Canaan. Third answer, why the word li is used, says the Kli Yakar, to keep it private. Yaakov wanted to cover this shvuah. He wanted to conceal the oath from those standing around. He says to his son, put your hand under my thigh and swear to me. Yosef says, you know what? I'll do as you say. I don't need to give an oath. Dad, you can trust me with my word. Father says, no, Hishavali, swear to me. But Li, do it to me quietly, in secret. I don't want anyone else to know about this. Why? Because it would have been embarrassing for Yosef to say that my dad doesn't believe me and I've got to give an oath. This is a father's last dying wishes. How would that look to the public? When a father asks the son to do something, the son says yes, and the dad says, no, that's not good enough, I want you to swear. It's not something you want for public ears. And therefore he says, he swore to him, levadoi, alone, privately. Question perhaps that could be asked on this, perhaps just raising this question, is how would this help later on when he's dealing with Pharaoh? If it's such a secret, how does he get Pharaoh to say, well, I swore to my father? And if it's not common knowledge, that might have been hard to explain that. Anyway, that's a little question on that third answer. Fourth answer, the Kli Yakar says, it is to lighten the oath. By adding the word li, it makes the oath much less severe. There are two types of oaths that a person can make. There's one oath that you can make, which based in of yesteryear, when they were a very serious oath, you had to hold a chayfetz of kedusha. You had to hold an object of holiness, a sefer Torah in your hand, a tefillin in your hand, mezuzahs in your hand, etc. Yaakov initially wanted him to do just that. Says the Kli Yakar in his fourth explanation. Initially, Yaakov says, put your hand under my thigh, referring to the bris milah. That's the mitzvah that he had. Because he wanted him to swear by holding or by connecting with a chayfetz of kedusha, of holiness. Yosef is not willing to do that initially. He says, Dad, I'll do it, but without an oath. Yaakov then thinks, my son Yosef doesn't want to take the very severe oath, the one that involves holding an object of kedusha. So his father makes a compromise. He says, you know what? Hishavali, just swear to me. Don't worry about the oath. Don't worry about the chayfetz. Don't worry about the kedusha, holding or connecting with my bris. Don't worry about that. Just swear. And if that's the case, how interesting, says the Kli Yakar, that there is no mention that Yosef actually put his hand under the thigh of his father. No mention of it. Now, we discussed this before. And we said before, according to some of the commentaries, it's out of respect. But perhaps, says the Kli Yakar, it doesn't say that because he didn't do so. In the same way that Eliezer, who did do this for Abraham, Eliezer, the son of Abraham, actually complied with this. It appears possibly that he didn't, because Yaakov wanted to make it lighter, etc. Now that we mention Eliezer, the servant of Abraham, the question that could be raised here is, both give an oath. Eliezer to Abraham, servant to master. Yosef to Yaakov in this week's Parsha, son to father, and yet there is a very different response. The Orach HaKodesh asks this question. We need to know why, first of all, does he need to tell him this? He could have done it. He could have just done it, and that would have been his answer. Why does he even need to say, Onochi esechid borecha? We don't find that response by Eliezer. When Eliezer is asked by his master Abraham, put your hand under my thigh, what's the response? The response is very swift. He puts his hand under the thigh, and that's it, and he takes an oath. But that's not the case here, not with Yosef. Says the Orach HaKodesh, what happened here was that by Yosef not responding in the same way, not acting in the same way, he's really telling his father, Dad, I don't need to swear. I'll do as you say. To which his father responds, as we've said so many times tonight, his father says, no, swear. He says to him a second time, Hishava. He's not happy with the answer that he said. Anochi asa. And therefore, he says, Meshiva, he's responding and saying, you know what? I trust you. I know you don't need to make an oath. I agree with your words, but please just do this for me. I want you to do it. I want you to take an oath. Do it for me. And the Orach HaKodesh again, like the Kleyakar, looks at the word li, to me. And he says, you know what? Don't swear because you need to swear. Swear because I feel better that way. Lahafis daiti. I just feel like a weight's taken off my shoulder. Lahafis daiti, to make me feel better. Or latama komosimi, or perhaps there is a deeper reason. And what could that deeper reason be? Says the Orach HaKodesh. Whilst Yaakov did not spell it out, deep down he was worried that there will be external pressures. Pharaoh might tell him, break your oath, etc., etc., and therefore or break your word to your father, and therefore he says, no, I want you to swear. According to all the commentaries so far, we find that Yaakov has asked Yosef to swear. The question is, does he agree to? Does he not agree to? Does he actually hold the chayfetz of Kedusha? Does he not? But there is one particular commentary, the Chassam Sofer, who says that Yaakov initially never requested Yosef to swear in the first place. A very different commentary. It's quite original. And if that's the case, what makes Yaakov change? Let's have a look at the Chassam Sofer. Chassam Sofer says on the words, V'yosisa chesed v'emes, I want you to act with kindness and with truth. He says, I've already noted that right from the beginning, Yaakov never asks Yosef to swear. He doesn't ask him to swear until later when he says the word Hishava. Furthermore, says Chassam Sofer, if you look at the words of Yaakov, he says, Una sasani, and you will carry me, rather than the word Vatisa'eni, I want you to carry me. And here Chazal say the following words. On the pasuk, Anochi esechid varecha, I will do as you say. There is a medrash, we mentioned it before, by the Rabbi Vayechi. I will do as you say means I will also ask my children to carry my bones from here, just like you have requested, my dear father, that we carry you out. I will ask my children to do the same. Now, Yaakov told Yosef, please act with me with chesed v'emes, kindness and truth. Rashi says, Chazal say, it's chesed shel emes. It's kindness which is absolute, totally emes. B'lishum tam upniya, without any ulterior motive, without the expectation of any reward, only for Hashem Yisbarach, b'litzipui tashlum schar, without any hope to get any reward, even schar shamayim. Why does Yaakov insist that it be chesed shel emes, no reward? Because he says, if you do it without any motive, but purely because I ask, I guarantee you Pharaoh will give you permission. Unasosani mimitzrayim, and you will carry me out of Egypt. Not you shall carry me, but you will carry me. I predict you will have no problems if you do it as a chesed for your dear father, if you do it a chesed shalemes without any motive. But something changes. At this point of time, says the Chassam Sofer, there is no mention of oath, not a word about taking an oath. But then Yaakov hears his son response. What does his son respond? Oh, Dad, I'll do as you say. I'll command my children as well. I'll tell my children that you'll take my bones out of here as well. Oh, says the Chassam Sofer. Once Yosef introduces some other motive here, that he's looking for some sort of a kickback, just like I'm taking my father's bones out of here, I'm hoping that God gives me the opportunity to be zoichet that my bones will come out of here as well. Then the position changes. Because now it's not chesed shalemes, says the Chassam Sofer. Yaakov is now worried. He's not anymore so confident that Pharaoh is going to give him a free hand. So therefore his father says, Hishava, please, now I want the oath. Now I want you to take an oath. As the Ramban says, not because he doesn't trust his son Yosef. He absolutely trusts his son. It's simply in order to allow Pharaoh, or to get Pharaoh to let him go and bury his father. As indeed Pharaoh says, albeit reluctantly, Alei ukvor avicha, go and bury your father, kasher hishbiacha, as he made you swear. Mashma, implying without an oath, no way I'd let you out of this country, not even to take your dad out of here. So according to the Chassam Sofer, how interesting that initially the reason that the shvuah doesn't come up, it's because there was no need to give a shvuah. He didn't need him. And it's only later, when Yaakov hears Yosef's midah keneged midah almost request, he says, now it's not really chesed shalemes. There's a little bit of motive involved here, a little bit of a midah keneged midah. Now Hishava, now I need you to swear. Now, the Guru Aryeh asks, why was the oath taken with the hand under the thigh? You will notice that's how the oath is taken. That's how it starts off. And according to Rashi, remember, Rashi learns, like most commentaries, that right from the beginning, Yaakov did want him to make a shvuah, and that's the concept of the hand under the thigh. But why swear with the hand under the thigh? It's obviously with the bris milah. But why choose the bris milah? Why not something else? Why not some other object? Why use the milah, asks the Gur Aryeh. Now, Avram does the same thing. Avram asks his servant Eliezer to swear by the bris milah, but there Rashi gives the reason. That's because it was a mitzvah, the first mitzvah he had, and it was very beloved to him, and it came to him through pain. That's very good for Abraham. But that reason cannot apply to Yaakov. Perhaps we could say, well, if my grandfather did it, maybe I'll do it as well. After all, Yosef, when makes his brothers swear, but he doesn't, there's no mention about a bris milah there. We don't find anywhere there that he mentioned that there was with a bris milah. But Yesh Lomer, perhaps, I think the reason is as follows, says the Gur Aryeh. The main way in which an oath was done was under the thigh. This was not just a Jewish thing. This was something that was noheg ba'umos. It was something that the Goyim did, and not necessarily to do with the bris milah at all. And the Gur Aryeh refers us to the Eben Ezra right back in the Parsha of Chayei. Let's have a look what the Eben Ezra there says. Avram says to his servant Eliezer, Simno yodcha tachas rechi, place your hand under my thigh. Says the Eben Ezra. Some say it's because of the bris milah, as Rashi indeed learns. But I think, says Eben Ezra, that there's something else here involved. There was a practice in those days that a person who wanted to give an oath was required to give an oath, had to show that he's subservient to the person he's giving the oath to. And the person who made the other fellow give an oath would tell him, if you really mean what you say, if you are really under my jurisdiction, then show it. Put your hand under my thigh. The idea of putting the hand under the thigh was that the master who insisted on the person taking the oath would sit and his thigh would be leaning upon the hand of the person who gave it, as if to say, okay, master, my hand is under your rishus. I will do as you will. It's almost like he's trapped. And then when Ezra says this practice went on in India, they did this in the land of Hoidu. If that's the case, Yaakov now thinks that I've got to do a shvuah, an oath, which Pharaoh will understand is an oath, which even the Goyim will understand it's an oath. As indeed Yosef goes to Pharaoh and says, my father made me swear. Now, if he didn't make him swear like the Goyim did it, it would not be an oath. And the whole idea of giving an oath to Yosef, according to the Chazal, was so that Pharaoh wouldn't stop him from burying his father. Otherwise, Pharaoh would say, break your oath. And Yosef would say, well, I'll break my oath that I swore that I know that you do not know Hebrew, as indeed it says. And for that reason, he had to make him swear. But how does he make him swear? He makes him swear like the custom of the day of the nations of the world, which was hand under the thigh, not because of the bris milah. If that's the case, says the Even Ezra, it says the Gur Aryeh, why earlier on Avram had to do it? Avram had to do it because he swore the bris milah because of the mitzvah of milah, as Rashi earlier said. But he doesn't give the reason because it was the practice to swear to put under the thigh. Because otherwise, why would Avram adopt the minig of the nations? But that's for Avram, who didn't need to show this oath to any pharaoh of Egypt, etc. This was between him and Eliezer. But Yaakov in our Parsha needed to make an oath which the Goyim would recognize as an oath. And the only way they did it was this hand under the thigh, as I said, not because of the bris milah, but as Even Ezra said, to show subservience. How interesting, says the Balaturim, that when you look at the word Simna Yodcha, please put your hand, when you look at the word milah, I should say, it's a gematria of the same as the two words Na Yodcha. Let's have a look at that. Milah is 40 and 10 and 30 and 5. Mem Yud Lamed Hay, 85. We look at the words Na Yodcha. Na is 50 and 1, that's 51. And then you've got the Yodcha, 10 and 4 and 20, which is 34. 34. 34 and 51 is exactly 85. How interesting that without saying the milah, the word Na Yodcha actually comes to that gematria. What is Chesed Shalemes? Well, the Chesed Shalemes, as we said before, is Chesed that one does with the death, with people that die, that don't hold for any gimul, any reward, is called Chesed Shalemes. I'm sorry that we've run out of time now. There is more to give in this year, but perhaps we could continue on Friday when I'm scheduled to give a shir in the Achikala. But I think I will leave it at this point. And we will discuss further topics in Merz Hashem on Friday. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Maria Malthouse. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a loyal listener.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Also.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
יישר כוח, כרמלה פלשר, תודה רבה.
ברוכים to you. Thank you.
Leo.
Yeah, can you tell me afterwards? I've got to go to Marathon.
With pleasure, whatever you want.
Yeah, please, you can call me later. Yeah.